ahead as you listen to today's presentation.
Good morning, everybody. Sorry I haven't been able to make the last few meetings. I've been extremely busy. I'm going to designate Kevin Cahoe as my backup chair position here in case I can't make meetings, to make sure that there's someone sitting here in this position. I'm going to go ahead and have everyone do their introductions, go around the room here. We'll start over here.
My name is Bill Canine. I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Workforce Education Coalition.
Good morning, my name is David Alvarez. I'm with the State of California with the Employment Development Department.
Daniel Dominguez, I'm the field representative for Congresswoman Julia Brownley.
Mike Croxton, I'm the Chief Information Officer for Naval Service Warfare Center in Fort Wayne.
Good morning, I'm Chris Lewis. I work at JSR Technologies in Oxford.
Kay Miller, Placement Director of Ventura Adult Scholarly Education Programs, and I have brochures in case.
I'm Rodrigo Cardenas. I'm with the Ventura County Office of Education, VC Innovates, and I support teachers that are teaching courses in information communication technology throughout the county.
Alex Wright with Ventura County Community College District Economic and Workforce Development.
Meredith Jacobson, President of the WEC.
Chuck Sedlacek, CEO of American Technology Solutions.
Bill Pratt with Kinemed.
Brian Witt with Matter Labs.
Stephen Yeo with Unity. Rodney Nalance, Assistant Chief Information Officer for the County of Ventura.
Peter Zierbeck with Haas Automation.
Ken Shannon, IT Manager, Infrastructure Operations, also from Haas Automation.
Eric Went with Matter Labs.
And Bob Allen from KDTV.com.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome. Rodrigo, can you talk briefly about the hackathon?
Oh, sure.
When you're
Okay, when I'm in,
Yeah.
okay, absolutely.
So we're going to go through the 3 goals here we have. We'll start with Alexandria Wright, identifying industry needs and skill sets for IT professions. We have until about 9:15 to get through the first 2 items here. Go ahead.
Okay, the clock starts. I leave it to it's the rest of the group. It's never me. It's longer. I don't want to talk about this anymore. So, all right. So what we did is I reviewed information technologies, computer information system, and computer science occupations in Ventura County. These occupations are ubiquitous. They're noted in 2 primary industry sectors, the information sector as well as professional, technical, and scientific industry sectors. However, that still is only about 1/4 to 1/3 of the occupations, total occupations in this community. So because of the intricacy of the educational content in these fields, there will likely be subsequent reports that dive a little deeper into content and program delivery. Those are, again, the elements that rose to the top in this investigation amidst quantitative analysis and qualitative inquiry with industry throughout the county. So this will give us a nice perspective of what's going on, what the existing circumstances are. However, unlike the manufacturing report where we're able to really drill down to content immediately, we're going to need to explore a little more in this. However, I think this does give us a good platform to go from. So in the executive summary here, and we'll walk through this, I'll give you the highlights that I found the most interesting and applicable to what we're trying to do here, which is ensure that we have a stable and sustainable labor force here in Ventura County for these professions. So top in demand, emerging knowledge and skills required for the region are compartmentalized into about 6 or more actual components of these systems, of these fields. So you have programming and software development, you have cybersecurity, you have cloud computing, mobile development, software architecture, and network architecture. Database administration, of course, and web development are also right up there with the rest. So it's it's a bit different. We in academia are accustomed to categorizing and compartmentalizing into areas of study. And so this is quite broad, you know, and where we typically would think of these in a couple different areas or in siloed areas, I think we need to broaden our vision here to be inclusive of all of this here. So for example, something like programming. Programming is used for startup companies and existing companies, but it's also used heavily in mechatronics, right? So we have to start seeing that interdisciplinary role of a lot of these fields of study. What I found, I think, is most important is that unlike the typical areas of studies that we look at, IT, CIS, and CS is not necessarily a stackable program, right? You don't become a networker and then learn how to web design and then learn how to program. These are more horizontally laid skill sets. Hence, academic programming needs to accommodate that, so to speak. And instead of building in our traditional hierarchy, we need to ensure that there's flexibility, right? And this is a more horizontal platform with regard to education, so that somebody who is getting an associate, say, in computer networking, can hop over here and get their certificate in cybersecurity, and another certificate over here in maybe one of the more in-demand languages for the field that they're going to go into. So I thought that was very interesting. I found that repeated amongst employers. It was something that we couldn't have identified just looking at the statistics alone. This concept is derived from an idea or what you would call in industry a full stack developer. So that full stack developer is essentially someone who can understand front to back end components, right? So your image design, your web design, to your languages, to your database administration and back, right? And that's really, quite honestly, what I'm seeing across industry sectors and occupations. I think everybody in this room would confess that we're all being required to be more interdisciplinary in what we do. So that concept of a full stack developer really, I think, is the foundation from which we should look at developing these educational models. We'll get to the educational programming at the community colleges in a little bit. I just wanted to give you the highlights here right now. So now the other thing that I found that you'll see in just a little bit is that, I'll stick to employers for right now. I was going to start talking about our actual labor supply in the area. So that's something else interesting. But first of all, employers, depending on size, it was fairly reflective of what we found in manufacturing, whereby those smaller employers are looking for attitude and reliability and can pretty much train people internally. Larger employers are looking for an increased proficiency and competency. Both are looking for communication skills. So that written and verbal communication, of course, in these fields, it's a little more inherent to the character of the person who's probably likely going to be involved in the sector, but it's still something we need to be mindful of as we move through our education and training. So the other thing is to keep in mind that these occupations really are directly involved in entrepreneurship and small business startup, right? So these are the occupations that can permit expansion of existing industry and companies locally, as well as provide that foundation for startup and investment. It's easily transferable. You don't, and I think likely because you don't need that capital investment of that structure, right, and that building in order to make something. You're not making that widget. So it's a little more flexible in terms of shared space and working at incubators and doing your startups. We had a great example out of the city of Ventura. So just keep that in mind as we continue to discuss this, that these occupations are not just here for existing industry, but they're quite meaningful to this larger entrepreneurial ecosystem that is really a priority for the majority of our municipalities in our county. So, okay, so let's go over to page 2. What I did, similarly to manufacturing, is I really narrowed some occupations to look at. So we have the top 14 occupations, and I wanted to look at growth over time. So we start with, and so these 14 occupations all are coded with the same couple digits, so they're within the same category for the Bureau of Labor Statistics, okay, so they're the most obvious. So we have computer information research scientist, high degree, or high end, you know, you're looking at doctoral or professional degrees. You see there the change over time. We have decreased about 1%. We looked at 5-year growth, okay? So the columns are, you're looking at your 5-year change over time. Annual openings, about 11. Annual replacement jobs, about 10. Intuitively, I'm sure you guys understand that's people retiring, right, or moving on. Rather than new job creation. Gave you your median earnings, your hourly earnings. I like to look at median. It doesn't contain the outliers, so it gives you a more realistic picture of what's going on. Bless you. And then I give you education, work experience, and what's going on with our regional completions according to our iPad system here in the county and what's being reported. So as you go down this list, I'm not going to walk through each and every one of these with you, but you can see everything from security to database to networking to your support occupations, right? Your largest occupations are your computer user support specialists, as well as your computer systems analysts. You know, these are the types of programs in your networking. Let's see, networking computer systems administrators. We had 622 jobs in 2017. These are the areas for which we already have substantial educational programming, right? So we'll see that in a couple pages. We have it at our local adult schools, at Base. We have it at Moore Park, Oxnard, and Oxnard colleges, and we have Ventura looking at some stuff too. So. What you'll notice, I'm sure, is that there's been a decline, right, over the past 5 years. So if you were to look at the jobs from 2015 to 2017, we show growth. There's a 2% increase between 2015 and 2017. But I wanted to give you the tradition of the 5-year look back, which shows that decline. If you look at the next table, these are your projections to 2025. Okay, so it's the same occupations. You see that all of them are projected to grow, not decline, right? Because what have I said before? When we look at projections, we're just looking at algorithms of history, right? Historical performance. So it's going to show that growth here up to 2025. Well, I want to note something to you. So the total at the bottom of that 2025 jobs, about 8,100 jobs is projected for the area. That's equivalent to the number of jobs that were in this county in 2012. Okay, so as much as we can understand that this is a growing sector, what we will find is it is indeed growing, and I think we would be remiss to say, oh, based on these numbers, we're fine the way we are, and we don't need to worry about anything. That's why I said we need to keep in mind the entrepreneurial aspect for this. We need to keep in mind the expansion and attraction that can occur with investment in these areas. So as we move over to the next page, page 3, this is where we start to get to the existing labor force. So, I'm going to skip the first 2 little charts there and go to existing labor force. So what you'll notice is our resident workers. Okay, so basically we have about 11,000 resident workers amongst all these occupations, but we have 7,900 jobs. So when you're looking at the third column, the 2016 net commuters, those are the amount of people that live in Ventura County and are commuting outside the county for work, okay? Now, I looked at LA. Their supply and demand for these occupations looks about even. So I suspect, and as I spoke with a couple others, that people are commuting to Santa Barbara County and to Orange County. So again, it's not that we've inundated the labor market, so to speak, but this certainly deserves more time and analysis, more discussion of what's going on, what the most important areas of education are. Considering this, there's got to be a reason why people are commuting out of the area. It could be pay, it could be wages, it could be flexible work schedules and opportunity, work from home stuff. So there's clearly the reason behind this, and it's not to say that we're inundated in the current labor market. We have to investigate this a little more, okay? So the top 2 graphs, just to skip back to that, I pulled 3 other occupations that are higher level: the computer information systems managers, the computer hardware engineers, and the computer operators. You can see the level of education there, and you can see the annual openings, 46, 33, and 16 respectively. Again, I wanted to make sure that we included everything and not just what the Bureau of Labor Statistics would have had us look at. And then, of course, I gave you a couple of the industry sectors I spoke about before. So the 5182 one, that data processing, hosting, and related services, that comes out of your information industry sector. So for those of you, I'm not sure, Mary Beth, if we did our Ventura County report here. I don't think we went over that here. So I made that presentation to a couple other groups, including our partners at P20 Council. That is where you'll see the actual industry of information in the industry sector and how much we're exporting and how much we're importing. So that's what I wanted to note, the connectivity to that, which is one of our top 5 industry sectors with professional, technical, and scientific services, which is that 54, the next one that you see there, computer systems design and related services. So professional, technical, and scientific services in this county is top 5 with regard to our exports. So that means that we're pulling in money, we're pulling in taxes with that industry sector. So quite important. Again, more analysis needed there as to where that industry is going. But we clearly, it's very apparent when you look at the county and you look at professional, technical, and scientific services that is one of our top areas. We are a highly educated community. So we need to focus on maybe those middle skills occupations and middle skills education. Okay, on page 4, we move over to real-time labor market information. Please, as we move through this also, feel free to ask questions if there's something that you'd like to know more about. Real-time labor market information, so that's what we call looking at our job postings. So it's real-time info, it's the same exact occupations, those 14 occupations. You can see there I did 1 year, because I just wanted to look at 1 year. I didn't want to include any of those outliers from the previous years. 2015, we saw a real spike in job postings and hiring, but that's since dissipated. So just in 1 year, I think we can start to see the general trend of these job postings, which is fairly high, okay? So I like to look at the hires, right? That's really telling me what's going on, and we're looking at 342 hires per month between April of 2016 and May of 2017. Okay, so again, that's showing us a lot of traction in these occupations and in these fields. So then we get to our academic pathways. You're going to receive a presentation next week, I believe, or next month, sorry, from our CTE Dean over at Moore Park College regarding, I believe, existing future, or
It's
please?
Moore Park College and Oxnard.
And Oxnard, okay, good,
Maybe
yes.
Ventura, we'll see
Yes.
what we do.
Ventura, the only difficulty with Ventura, and I've been in touch with faculty, Dr. Gertner over there, is that they're doing classes and they don't have set up programs already versus Oxnard and Moore Park that already have set certificates in these areas. So you can see the certificates right here. I had an academic year 15-16 completions. However, I will be able to pull 16-17 at the very minimum. And we have 17-18 trickling in still. So there's often graduation applications and completions that trickle in for the next 6 months after actual graduation. So you'll see there we had about 19 graduates in 15-16. You can see the pathways that are offered here. A lot of it is the support tech, right? So the sports specialist, the network specialist, that's support tech. And then you have your Microsoft Windows. So those are the programs that I would say are also offered over at the adult schools. Okay, so we have a nice array of the support specialist educational programming and short-term training. We also have a nice array of the network jobs, the network education and training jobs, network specialist. We are Cisco, we do have a Cisco lab over at Oxnard. What's not listed here is what we are doing in contract education, which is the short-term training. So that we offer, and that's underneath my division, so we offer things like Security Plus and cybersecurity. We also did short-term CCNA, ICND 1 and 2, again, snippets. So we're allowed to be a bit more flexible because we're not moving through curriculum committee. We're not apportionment-based, we're fee-based over here. So as I was looking, quite frankly, at this concept of languages, and perhaps some of those of you in the room would like to speak up to this, is so when we look at education and training, what we notice is missing is this, which I'm sure we're going to hear a little bit about because I know Moore Park has been working on it, is languages, right? Programming and software development. And so that's number one. However, what languages? That's the next question, right? So there's some staple languages. I thought that might be useful for a little bit of discussion today. You know, there's always, back in my day, it was, you know, C+ that I had to take in order to get that, that math degree and that economics degree. So, but I'm sure there's more. There was a great story, Eric, if you'd like to share about the R code. And so I really appreciated this because it really did tie it together to the point that we as education and trainers, although we, for a reason, have a very rigorous and long-standing process for curriculum design and approval, it's the very legitimacy that academia rests on. I believe a lot of this in the 21st century and from industry, we are being asked from our state chancellor's office to really develop new methodologies, right? New methodologies for program design and delivery. We are asked of that by our constituency too, by what people want and what's in demand. So our traditional approach to, all right, let's determine what languages, let's create our courses, let's create our certificate, and we'll have that set in stone for 5 years, will likely not work for us in these occupations. We're going to need to be more flexible. For example, it was the R code, correct? All right, so for artificial intelligence, that popped out of nowhere, and all of a sudden the Bay Area needed, I think you said 2,000 to 3,000 people trained in this code within a matter of months, right? And so that's where things like the short-term custom training can pop in. We are working with our workforce development partners at the Workforce Development Board, also our Deputy Sector Navigator through Deputy Sector Navigators through the state of California for our region, our South Central Coast region, on leveraging funding so that we can provide the fee-based training, the cost isn't inordinate, and people can still get through. So that's the type of flexibility that I'm intimating. Eric, do you have anything else that you'd like to add to that?
That was awesome.
Okay, I captured it,
Yeah.
okay. So again, just keeping that in mind, I find that the most interesting thing. As an academic, as someone who's taught and been faculty in 3 different disciplines, this concept of, oh my gosh, there is no hierarchy here. This really does need to be a horizontal platform to a certain degree. I'd love further input from anybody at the table with regard to that. And not only that, when we're thinking of things like mobile development and cloud-based administration, again, this is all on that horizontal platform with cybersecurity too. So we need to design this so that people can pop in and out and they're not necessarily waiting in line to take a certain course and then take another course. Of course, we're always going to have hierarchy in things specific, right? Just networking. Will be the introductory, and then as you move up. Please also note too, with our contract education, that our education and training, similarly to the adult schools, I would say in some aspects, we are focused on test prep. So the education and training is conducive to preparing someone for their industry exam. These occupations, more so than any other, are far more focused on your industry certifications rather than, you know, your university degree or your associate's degree, which is fine. We can kill 2 birds with the same stone, you know, and we've done that in manufacturing. You know, even looking at the pre-apprenticeship, I know AR mentioned this, that our pre-apprenticeship in manufacturing, given, and that's a 40-hour course, given maybe a handful of more hours, we probably would be able to test prep somebody for NIMS 1. So that kind of creative thinking, right, and innovative understanding of how we can leverage our traditional educational focus with modern techniques and industry exams, I think will do us well, particularly in this sector. So as we move forward, these are just a couple of interesting notes I wanted to give you guys. I wanted to give you the cities. Page 5 and 6 are just your top cities that are posting for jobs. Just to explain briefly what you're seeing there, the ratio of total to unique. What the database I use focuses on is, here's a gazillion job postings, right? So you see Thousand Oaks in 1 year had 23,000 job postings. But out of those 23 job postings, only 4,400 were really unique. So that means that people are posting their jobs and calling it different names and describing it slightly differently. But when you do that regression analysis and you pull the tasks and the responsibilities in, it's really 4,400 specific occupations. And that's important to know, right? Because if we're just looking for certain job titles, we're not going to find it. That's why I included this in here. Because there's a large demand in these postings, but when it comes to the actual occupations, once that's narrowed down, it's quite a few less. Yes, Eric.
Would it aggregate things, like if I was looking for 4 different developers, would it aggregate it into one developer? Like if I was looking for a junior developer, senior developer, and a developer, would that become one posting?
Yeah,
The
unless
skill
the
sets are
words,
similar.
because I know that they're using particular words in that regression analysis.
Okay.
So unless you were incredibly varied in your definition of those developers, they're going to aggregate, they're
Okay,
going to
cool.
lump that all together.
Cool.
Stephen.
So if you've got the same occupation as is being distilled, does it account for the position or the number of positions open?
I'm sorry.
Let's say I'm looking for a developer,
Okay.
and it doesn't matter if it's junior or senior, but a particular developer.
Mm-hmm.
Does this say that there were 4 positions open for a developer, or just that one of these 4,000 was a developer position?
It's the former. So it's
It's
actually,
former.
yes, it's the former.
Hiring
It's
more
actually
people.
it's actually saying that there's, for a developer position, it's one of those 4,400 specifically. So, and again, it's nice to understand what's going on in a more granular manner in the county, even though quite frankly, I think we can all see it, we're one economic region. We don't have an incredible diversity in this, and we need to focus on leveraging again those resources amongst the adult schools and the community colleges and the universities around. So that's what's going on there with your postings. And then I gave you the top posted occupations. So to your guys' questions on page 6 and 7, you'll see the actual occupations. So here, they did it a little differently in the EMSI database, and they were actually delineating within the occupation what the differences is. So there you go, software developer applications, the second one on page 6. You had a total of 7,700 job postings and 1,700 unique postings. Okay?
So,
Yes, sir.
oh,
Good.
Brian.
I was just curious, is there a way that you were able to tell if these are for local companies or virtual? Because we advertise in other counties to work for us, but the actual company's located like in Sacramento. So the taxes and stuff are getting paid there, right?
I haven't looked at that.
Yeah, I don't know how
My
you would
futuristic industry. I will though. I'll ask them. They're actually having a conference right now that I usually attend, so I'll look into
I was
that.
just
I'll
curious.
see what the scoop is. My guess is, knowing the system the way I know it, is it's based on zip code of hire.
Okay.
So if you're hiring them out of here and you're posting out of here, it's showing in here in the county. But I'll look into that for you. And I'm sorry, Mary Beth?
So I am not an economist, so this might be obvious to everybody else, but when I look at software developers' applications, and there's 7,700 total posted occupations, am I correct to think that 1,700 plus were for software development applications? Is that what this is telling me?
So this is correct in a way, yes. So it's basically saying there were 7,700 postings, and they were varied in their job title and in the definition of their job somewhat, but by searching for probably, and this is what I'll ask them, how many terms are they searching for? You know, what are they looking for? They've narrowed it down to really 1,700 that are really different from one another. So jobs that are truly different than one another versus the 7,700 that there might be 1,000 that really are almost identical. The companies are just calling them different job titles and defining them slightly differently.
So one job from one company might be posted 4 different ways?
Yes.
Really? They do?
Well, you know, this is one of the reasons why I work with human resource associations now.
Oh, I get it. So that
It's
they can reach,
classification,
they
yeah.
can reach more people. Certain people might be searching for specific things. So to
Absolutely.
find those things, you need to be in multiple categories, you need to word it different.
And there's different
I get it.
classifications,
Okay.
and there's union regulations in the state of California, and so
Okay.
I honestly, and so one of the things that I'm doing is I'm working with our temp agencies But I'm also going to search out the Human Resource Association. I sat on that board in Arizona, in my area, because this is the conversation, right, that needs to be had. Because what's going on? Are you recognizing, is there connectivity between the programming at the adult schools, community college? Usually once you get to university, you're at the bachelor's level, so you're fine. But A, are they recognizing our certifications? And B, how are you defining your jobs? You know, and how are you posting these jobs? And, you know, for example, what you saw out of educational requirements, when you go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, because I went to ONET, right? And I started looking at the detailed work activities and the tasks, just like I did with manufacturing. Well, what I found from the feds is they're likely to overestimate the amount of education required. So it really was bachelor's and above. For a lot of these occupations that I think the people in the room would agree are not necessarily bachelor's level or above. Maybe professional certifications, you know, because we're talking entry and middle level skills here, you know, and then the continuum, of course. But so I found that interesting as well. So anyway, human resource agencies, that's something that over time I think we'll be able to garner more information, create greater connectivity for our education and programming. Let's not forget that when we look at workforce development, it's not, education is the most important thing concurrently with employers and employer input, but it's also connectivity to job placement. For whatever reason it is in this era, it's difficult for youth to find jobs. It's not the traditional routes that we took necessarily. They have to look at different areas, look for different job titles. You know, what you studied in your professional certifications may not necessarily be the job title that's posted, but you should apply for that because that actually is what they're talking about. So I think that the importance of the job placement specialist, the job developer, the career coach, that's what we in academia call that same position, that person, that connectivity between the education and the employment, I think is quintessential in this era as well, and in working in this county. So page 8, we start to get to those top hard skills that are posted, okay? So page 8, 9, 10 are your qualifications, 12 are your common skills. So this started to delineate, again, further what language are we talking about? Is it SQL? Is it Java? C++? So this is where I say those further detailed reports will come out, again, exploring not just the content of, say, a certificate in cloud development or mobile development, but in what is our program mix and delivery, that's our academic speak for what are we creating and how are we delivering it and how are we being responsive to the constituency's needs in terms of that delivery. For example, in manufacturing, if we're going to do a registered apprenticeship program for somebody who used to work on manual mills and lathes and now they're going to go learn how to be a CNC programmer, right, and run and operate that machine, we can't stick them in a class 4 nights a week for 3 hours a night. That's just not going to work. We need to figure out a different way of delivering that so that we're accommodating, really, the full-time workforce, which I think may lead us here in these IT occupations, quite frankly. I think we're going to have our traditional student that's going to go straight to school out of high school and be able to take these varieties of programs and maybe move on to university. But then we're also going to have that adult professional learner who's going to be in there, who's maybe, maybe it's somebody in their late 20s who's been a support system specialist for a while and they're like, wait a minute, I need to upskill, I need to go get that Security Plus certificate, that cybersecurity knowledge, I need to garner another language or something like that. So we have to be cognizant of that as we move forward in our planning. And that's again where perhaps a contract education format is more flexible for that, but maybe we can also develop a new methodology for the curriculum review process, right? So, and that's a much larger discussion, larger discussion with academia and the institutes. So, so that's pretty much it for this round of information. Any thoughts or comments on this?
So one of the things when we were trying to do goal setting before, we had this conversation about trying to split IT. Is it like someone who sits down and writes code, or is it someone who helps in the infrastructure and sets up networks and runs cables and stuff, right? We're like, which ones? And looking at the occupation growth, you see like web developers, and you see the two kind of, if you wanted to split it in half, you can see the two, but it's weird, like there's growth in both, but yet most of the job posting skills look to me more like development skills and development requirements.
When you say
Higher
both,
up.
I'm sorry, what were you speaking?
Like more hardware versus like software.
Okay, yeah.
So if there was a split, and it's one of those things when we were setting goals, it was like, who are we speaking to? Who are we trying to get? Is it like a code camp, or is it you get like hardware and infrastructure training, right? But looking at the skills and the postings, it seems to be more heavily put towards software. But then to me, just at a glance, it looks like in the occupation growth, it looks more like hardware. If I could split it that way, but I'm just curious to see what everybody else thought. It just, the numbers don't seems odd. It seems like it's split, but I just think that's one of the things that we had with goal setting and who were we talking to, who was the audience, what trainings do we need. I think everybody looks at IT a little bit different, right? Like if you come from a development background, you're going to think software programming. If you come from the hardware side, you're going to be. So I think that was a hard split in the beginning when we first started talking here. So I just thought the numbers were interesting.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think to piggyback on your point, it's interesting if you look at the top hard skills in job postings, a lot of them are software as well, right? It's software development, SQL, Javas and JavaScripts. But then if you go to the qualifications, it's almost all on the other side of the house. It's all networking and hardware certifications, which means that we have some sort of lack in a trust component on these skills, right? There aren't.
But in the occupation job growth projections, the computer programmer is one of the few that goes down by 10% and everything else goes up. So it just seems odd.
It's likely because, again, Bureau of Labor Statistics classification. This is exactly why we need both quantitative and qualitative inquiry, because we're clearly not capturing it in data analysis alone. And that's where I came to that conclusion, and I put that quote on the front from the employer is, we really need to look at this as a horizontal continuum
Is it really
of
going
skills.
down? I see that you've got the red 10% in parentheses. but-
Yeah.
Or is it really just diversifying to those other fields? Because what maybe we used to
Absolutely.
call computer programmer now is captured under web developer, software developer, application developer.
Maybe,
Are we
right.
just starting to become
Excellent
more
point.
Yeah.
specific
Yeah,
and breaking out the,
that's a good
I
point.
don't know if it's really going down.
That's why I said take this with a grain of salt.
Yeah, no.
This is not absolute. This doesn't mean that, oh my gosh, we don't need to train in this, why are we even talking about this? This means that there's complex variables involved. Absolutely to that point. It could just be a different occupation now.
Right.
What was once this is now that, so.
I think that is part of the trick with like some of the job postings. I know with a lot of the companies we work with, especially if they're getting new to tech or website or trying to hire for that position, they don't really know what to call it or what they're looking for. They go and they say, well, we have a SQL database, we have this, so let's hire for that, but what do we call that role? What do we call it? Depending on how big the business is, I think the title gets bigger based on the size of the business too. So smaller business we'll give them this big title because we only have one guy, so it doesn't really matter. And then if it's a bigger business, then they have to kind of separate it out so that I don't think it's equal across the board.
And I don't know if you run into this also, but we tend to start playing with titles based on what we need to pay them.
Exactly,
Yeah, because you've
classification.
got, you've got labor categories, you gotta hit per dollar amount.
Absolutely. Peter?
I would suspect there's a pretty big difference between the needs of a large business versus a small business. And I'm not sure if you originally met with, a variety or a mix of both, but I know typically at our company, being a little bit larger business, we hire a lot of more specialized people for particular roles, whereas I got to believe that a small business is going to need to blend a lot of these skills into one person or a few people.
You're absolutely correct, and that was what I found, I briefly mentioned it in that executive summary, is depending on the size of the firm, The smaller the firm, the more they want a better attitude, reliability, and that interdisciplinary skill set versus that larger firm that's looking for those specialized certifications, qualifications that pinpoint that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
You know, we keep talking about what is there, and all your statistics are about what's going on today in IT. The story is that students in the 4th grade today, we don't know what jobs they're going to do. So isn't it the creativity that is needed in Ventura County to bring us different than everybody else? Or are we just going to play in the same game and compete for the same people?
Agreed. I think that is, and that's the goal of the partnerships with the community college system, with VCOE and Dr. Morse and her innovative programming, and in our relationship with the adult schools and that growing partnership, is to be innovative, to be novel, and to be able to provide education in a platform that is tailored to the unknown almost, right? Which is a difficult concept. How do we do something like that? But we certainly have the human capital and the intellect.
But we have to, as enterprises, be able to support this education. Like I'm involved with the VCOE and the Community College District, you know, working with the students, trying to look at new ways of becoming an entrepreneur and staying in town. So,
Thank you.
Even beyond, you know, a 4th grader that won't show up in the labor market, you know, for another 10 years or more, just in the next 2 to 3 years, it'd be fantastic to see a better match between what my hiring needs are and what the pool, who's in the pool. Because when we get a stack of resumes about that tall and nobody qualifies, then we have a problem.
you know what was
And I imagine I see a lot of heads nodding, so no, I'm not the only one.
Yeah, but the interesting thing was at Oxnard College last year, the Navy came down, you know, with their workforce thing where they pay for tuition and everything. And they're starting a new program trying to get local students to come in and partake in the program, because when they were bringing students from outside the community, after they graduated, it was so expensive to live here that they moved away from here. So they're looking for students. We've got, Ventura County has the greatest weather.
Of course, we would prefer to hire local, of course.
Yes.
If we can get the skill set we need local.
Yeah.
I want to make a comment. We were talking about blending of jobs, and in my field, cybersecurity is one of these areas where smaller businesses need a blending of, you know, responsibilities and skills. You know, the smaller businesses tend to hire, you know, like a network administrator, but they need them to be knowledgeable in cybersecurity, let's say. I noticed that in Ventura County, I don't see a lot of jobs for just specifically cybersecurity analysts or, you know, specialists. You've got to be a network administrator. You've got to have the cybersecurity skills combined in this county. So I haven't talked with a lot of career counselors, but that would be something that I would recommend to them, that, hey, if you have people interested in doing network administration, that for engineers, that they have to have some type of cybersecurity, you know, certification or course that they need to take. It's mandatory now. I mean, we're all seeing what's happening in the news. You know, board level people have had cybersecurity at a lower level priority for many years, and they don't really care about it. They just say IT people take care of it, but now they're realizing that their jobs are on the line. Their shareholders, you know, are at risk. We've seen Yahoo go from $40 billion to $4 billion company. We just saw Equifax fall. Who would have ever thought that Equifax would have fallen from cybersecurity? They have more lawsuits than their company's valued at. I mean, this is a scary thing. We're going to start seeing very large, you know, too big to fail organizations failing because of cybersecurity. It's one of those things that it's got to be, you know, a priority.
We bounce back and forth on that. We've been working on all of our technical qualification standards, training plans for all of our personnel. And we flip back and forth on, is cybersecurity a job, a specific job? And in some cases it is. Or is it a piece of everybody else's job? So is it everybody on this list?
It's
You know,
both.
the network engineer, it
Definitely.
is, right? So you're absolutely right, but it's not just the network engineer. The developer needs to know, the web programmer needs to know, the mobile programmer needs to know, the DBA needs to know. They all need a cyber component in their training and development. And they're far more valuable if they show up in the job pool with, you know, those DBA certifications and some kind of cyber certification. Or that programming, like, you know, I've got ASP.NET, Java, and C# and whatever else, and some kind of cybersecurity certification. The combination of the two is much more valuable.
If I may add to that, I would extend it to everyone within an organization. It's not just IT. I mean, you look at phishing exploits, doesn't really have anything to do with IT, right? You're only as strong as your weakest link, and your weakest link are the actual individual staff members. We're 9,400 to 10,000 employees at the county, and we've had issues with phishing, and you can have we have a dedicated staff security, we have 5 plus other experts, and our perimeter we view as fairly strong. All it takes is one email.
And even though I think that's absolutely true about they all need that cyber component, we're finding we are hiring more and more full-time cybersecurity people whose entire job is auditing, internal inspection, vulnerability management, boundary protection. More and more and more, it is becoming a full-time job.
Yeah, I think the market's redefining.
And I don't think you can see that from this.
No, you can't. That's an industry that's just growing like crazy. I think they said it's going to be a $1.2 trillion industry, cybersecurity, by 2020. We're not far off from that, you know, and it's just going to be a flooding demand of jobs in that career field. And like you said, it's got to be blended, you know, into other skill sets, definitely.
I had a question here. So you mentioned a couple of times about increasing the qualitative inputs to this.
Mhm.
What are your plans to kind of bolster their confidence and accuracy of all these projections?
So it's going to take more inquiry. It's going to take deliberate discussions. So, for example, the discussion that was just had, that's the one that educators need to hear, right? That the faculty need to hear and the deans, because what do we do with cybersecurity right now? Do we create a certificate in cybersecurity? Do we do, that goes through curriculum committee and in 18 months is formalized, because that's what it's taking to get through curriculum committee. Or do we run it via contract education and do this short term, right? Open enrollment for anybody who needs, and work with the Workforce Development Board on that. Or do we use contract ed to fill the gaps right now and plan for a more robust cybersecurity, maybe associates, given the direction that was just spoken of, that this is indeed its own occupation, and we are going to be moving in that direction. That's what it takes. So it's going to take, I suspect, till after the new year.
Can you elaborate on the second
option?
Yeah, the second option.
Or how many did I mention? Three. Okay, so the second one is that contract education one. Yes, so we're, in the state of California, the community colleges can receive apportionment, which is how we're funded, right, through your tax dollars, based on student enrollment for credit-bearing classes and non-credit-bearing classes now. So what we can do is, and we can fully subsidize the non-credit ones, which is the nice thing, right? Once we get something into non-credit, it's, all right, no cost. We're already getting paid through the state for that, through your tax dollars. But what we can do in contract education is I can get something up and running right now. So for example, we already have a design of a 40-hour, 1-week class that test preps you for Security Plus. So we can schedule that to run on a regular basis, maybe once a quarter, depending on demand. It's going to have to be fee-based because we run fiscally solvent, my division. But like I said, We're exploring resources with the Workforce Development Board, because the thing is, Department of Education, you know, of course we have to be credit or non-credit and go through our curriculum review there, which again, there's a method to the madness, right? There's a reason why it's so intensive of a process. I just want to make sure that we understand that we're not just going out of our way to be slow. There's a rigor that's part of it and part of that legitimacy. However, I'm a full believer in new methodologies, that we can obtain the same amount of rigor and perhaps shorten what's going on here, right? And so we can use contract education. When I design contract education, I use the same protocol as anybody would going through curriculum committee. So I'm looking at student learning outcomes, I'm looking at goals, I'm looking at content, I'm looking at evaluation. Your majors there. So we could use contract education as a stopgap right now. And just depending on the input from this committee and further industry inquiry, if we come away from this saying, you know what, we really need you to run a Security Plus class at minimum once a quarter. And we now know you guys and we can get the announcements out. We can do that, like I said, while perhaps we're working on a larger, more detailed associate degree that maybe even has transferability to one of the universities, and that's completed in a 2-year time, but we're not waiting around for that. We're actually getting something done. So we can do, we're open and flexible in contract education. And you know, we found that with manufacturing too. Perhaps it became more and more apparent that depending on the industry sector, depending on the need, that contract education might indeed be that flexible gap filler for right now to address that challenge.
Alex, what could a group like this do to help community colleges identify the areas in IT where it would be useful to have or create?
Yeah.
Right. What process could we put in place with this group?
Sure, and if I may add one more thing before I get to that. What I use contract education for, quite honestly, is indeed to be responsive, right? So that's my first and foremost dedication. It's student success and be responsive to our employer needs. But I would be remiss if I saw something that I thought, you know what, this really could be a good non-credit and a good credit. So I use it as a transitional platform almost sometimes. What this work group could do, what I would suggest, and it's totally up to the work group, and it's my own analytical head, is I would focus on, so the second paragraph in the executive summary is where I lay out all these topic areas, okay? Programming and software development, cybersecurity, cloud computing, mobile development, software architecture, network architecture, database admin, and web development. If we were to compartmentalize that so that there is a discussion about each and every one of those, that's how we'll start to narrow, because I think what's been problematic is this is so big and so broad, and as everybody mentioned, we're defining things differently. So if we can just, these seem like the good components, the reality, the reflective, yeah, and you tell me, is this reflective of your needs? This categorization right there. And then I would go down get down the list. And every time we meet, maybe cover a couple of these. And in the meantime, you know, work with faculty, etc.
I would suggest that the more representative that this group is, the better the output's going to be. So we can set aside a meeting or two or whatever it would take to plow through this conversation. But it would be helpful if the folks here would invite somebody from industry to come, because I truly believe that our result will be better the more representative we are of what's out there.
This contracted, non-accredited option.
Yes.
I haven't been able to define that, what I've been thinking in my head for the past few months, and you've defined that.
Does that work? Okay.
Yeah, and what I kind of see happening is the colleges need to have a short-term course. It could be like, I don't know, 4 hours for 4 weeks or something of that nature, where contracted help, you know, comes in, an industry expert, and maybe like I would call the cybersecurity course applied cybersecurity. So the students that go through and get the Security Plus and whatever cybersecurity courses they take, they can go into this final stage where they're talking to an industry expert. That industry expert says, okay, you've learned all this stuff, but this is changing like every 3 months. So let me show you how to apply what you've learned to what's happening right now, and give them the new information of maybe new technologies. I mean, I know of 4 now patented technologies that are going to just now come to market. You're not going to hear that in the curriculum.
Yeah.
It may change their
That's
whole,
a good-
the whole way that they, handle cybersecurity just by product innovation. So those experts can, educate them on that and give them a heads up so they have, an edge.
Well, and connect you, which, and again, the more we bring faculty into this conversation, the better it will be, because they're there in the classroom. And I know faculty in this field are dedicated to making sure that it's applied. I really like that concept. It's almost more of a capstone class then, because I always picture it from like an entry-level beginning, right? Oh my gosh, we absolutely need this skill, but maybe if we get them in our class, then we can shoot them on a pathway into the community college system or elsewhere. But what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's almost like a capstone, which would quite frankly be connection to maybe professional associations, right? That keep you up to date, that let you know what's coming out, because right, research and due diligence is a huge part of everybody's job in this era. So maybe that's inclusive in that. Maybe it's also a test prep. If we're not getting test prep for industry certs for CompTIA exams, for example, if we're not getting that into the actual curriculum, because there's a bit of a difference, I'm sure everybody will agree, between studying for a test prep and learning something, right, over here, then maybe that's what it's used for too.
So let's take a step back, because we need to move on from here. We only have about 5 minutes left. I think that next month will be useful because we're going to have the community college CTE directors come and share with us what they're already teaching. We need to know what the universe is and what's being taught before we can start offering suggestions, I think, about what's missing. But after that, and maybe we can talk about this more next month, but I think that we need to become a working group. We need to be giving input as opposed to being receptors all the time. That's the only way I think we're going to get what it is you all need in your workforce. So I think what I'm going to do is put on the agenda next month some time for us as a group to brainstorm about how it is we want to be contributing to the solution and the design, if it's contract ed or something else, to collaborate with educators. What do you all think? Does that make sense?
Very much so.
Okay, we're nodding our heads. So, all right, one more month of getting input, getting to know the faculty, and next month then we will talk about next steps and how we're going to put our footprint on what the future looks like. Okay. Thank you, Alex.
You're welcome.
That was great.
Can I ask a question about the
Yes.
demographics?
Of course.
This is page 4, and I think the top here is the real-time labor market. And if I'm counting correctly, maybe 30% are software development related positions. Maybe around 115, it's about roughly 30%. But yet, when I look at the second half of the page, all the community college development programs, they're all networking and operating system. None of them are focused on software development.
You are correct, sir.
So even if we weren't doing this, even if we weren't sitting here meeting, is your organization looking at lining up the development programs and the funding that goes to the schools to match where the jobs are?
That would be a more detailed question for the CTED that you will see next October, next month. However, I can tell you that Moore Park College is indeed working on programming. To what degree? You'll have to ask the dean. Which is why Mary Beth aligned that, but you hit the nail on the head, I would say, insofar as what we're doing with our education and workforce development.
The school system has this data, whether we meet or not. This is already available. And I would assume they're using it to make decisions about having funding and what programs to stand on. What you're looking for from us is the above and beyond what you can't get out of the demographic data, which is the cybersecurity piece that's hidden throughout, the other intangible things that aren't showing up in your data. But you have this already. I would hope the schools are already marching to what the data's telling.
So, and I can tell you in the recent history, they just haven't had somebody in my position. They've never had a labor economist that worked for them. So what I've been doing is trying to churn this stuff out and get it to the CTED so that they can look at what's going on and see, because it's a pretty obvious discrepancy, right? You can look at the page and you can see what's going on here. So to the strategic approaches of the Board of Trustees, to their strategic plan, to the Chancellor's Office priorities, this is a priority. Getting this information to CTE deans and making decisions based on this type of analysis is absolutely a priority as we move forward. So, a new day, but you hit the nail on the head, certainly.
Alex?
Yes, please.
Related to Michael's question, you've heard this from me before related to machining programs. Are there industry members on advisory committees related to these programs?
So unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that. We have our CTE deans coming in for IT, so I would recommend asking that question about the advisory boards. You know, in terms of manufacturing, I think it's a new day already, so we're going to cover that one, and we have a meeting coming up. But in terms of all the rest of these advisory boards, again, maybe one of the things that these guilds provide is that venue to get the faculty and the CTE deans here. Because really, CTE deans have the decision-making authority for all this. I sit externally, and all I can do is the analysis. I have control over contract ed that I can run, but really, the decision-making authority lies within the Institute's Career and Technical Education Dean. And perhaps this is the venue where Mary Beth can get them to a nice, cooperative, you know, copacetic environment to ask these questions, because I would say that that's important. And the quantity of advisory board meetings. You know, Ed Code requires 1 meeting a year. CTE deans who, for example, at College of the Canyons, she's really hot after making sure that they're on top of things. She wants more than 1 advisory board meeting a year. So that type of stuff. Who's on your advisory board meetings? How often are you meeting? You know, I will continue to have industry roundtables in conjunction with this group, and sometimes side luncheons to go specifically into content. And that information will continue to go directly to the CTE deans. But then what happens there, you know, that's really a matter of...
And I think that's one of the uses of this group. You know, we talk to those deans, we find out what's going on. I think you also have to have tenures on your advisory committee. You can't have the same people there for 10 years. They need to be independent of the institution. That's a whole conversation, I think, in itself.
But at the same time, I'm looking at page 4, and if I'm reading it correctly, you have 19 graduates in an entire year out of 2 colleges.
Out of 2 colleges, and I suspect that we have slightly more graduates in the last couple of years, which, like I said, I'll get that and I'll resend this out electronically. But yeah, you know, and that goes back to that other conversation about career coaches, right, and job placement. And when students go, the traditional students that go to college, for those of you who haven't worked in post-secondary before, I mean, if you can remember, not a lot of people know what they want to do. I had 7 majors. So just to put it out there, I had 7 majors before I figured out what I wanted to do. So I think that job placement, the career coach is essential for showing students that these are viable pathways that are high demand jobs. Does that make sense to your point? But yeah, there's no other way that I can think of that is so tangible as to get to students in that way.
If you're going to put that number in there, about the number of graduates, it'd be great to have how many started the program.
Oh, that's a good call too.
Great data.
Okay, because of time restraints here, Mary Beth will talk about goal number 2 here.
So next month, we will have the CTE instructors here, and the goal of that, and there could be others, but the way this started was Bill's idea about finding the fast track system and taking a couple classes from looking at what the courses are that are offered at the various campuses and identifying any that could be grouped together logically to give a student the background that they need for an entry-level job. So that's a long conversation, and some of what has been raised here today will also go into that conversation. So I think it will go over a series of months, but the target will be to first become familiar with what is it that's being offered And when you all look at it as industry professionals, what do you see that perhaps isn't currently drawn together that could be useful? So more later on that one.
Yeah, it's the content and how it's the program mix and delivery that we need to delineate over time.
Right.
And we need to talk about each of these subject matters separately. I think that's the best organization. And when we're done with that, we might find some leverage, something over here that matches
Right.
something over here that we can leverage into the same program. But I really think organizationally, if we go one concept at a time,
We can do that.
that'll work great. And again, keeping faculty highly engaged. I work very closely with faculty, but having the CT deans are the decision-making authority. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, we'll move on to goal 3. Rodrigo will tell us about the VC Innovates Computer Science Advisory Committee. And if you could briefly mention the hackathon.
Sure, and I'll be quick because I know we're pressed for time. So thank you. Dr. Morse usually attends these meetings, but she asked me to come, not on her behalf, but just to start coming to these regularly. So we met last, I believe, April. It's sort of similar to what's happening here. And we're meeting again on October 6th to have from 8 to 10 in the morning to have another follow-up on the advisory meeting that we had in April. Again, it's to sort of fill those gaps in the high school educational system and figure out what our students need to learn in terms of computer science. We found that there were some things that we thought teachers were teaching but were not, or maybe didn't have a depth of knowledge. And when we met in April, many industry folks came to the table and said, we're willing to work with teachers to sort of do what we call these little mini universities where they can learn skills that maybe they've kind of are not too familiar with, because many of our teachers have been teaching for 10, 15 years and have not been in the industry for a while, so they kind of, they tend to go more towards the educational side of things and tend to forget what's being taught out in the industry. So anyway, that's on the 6th, and many folks that came last time will be coming again, but you don't necessarily have to have been there in April. You can come for the first time on the 6th.
If I could add
yes.
for just a moment there, I went to that last advisory committee meeting, and I can share with you that these teachers are like sponges. They are there, and they want to hear what you all have to say. Because the truth of the matter is, and they're very candid about this, that a lot of them were math teachers, and they were recruited to teach computer science. It is not their strongest skill set, and to the extent that somebody is willing to help them acquire skills, point things out to them, they are very receptive. So it would really be wonderful if some of you could participate on the 6th from 8 to 10 in the morning. It is at the VCOE Conference Center. Is it on Adolfo?
Yes.
And it's just around the corner here. So please mark your calendars. I'll send out a reminder. I mean, we talk about who it is we want in our workforce. Well, it starts someplace, and it starts with these young people and these teachers, and they are receptive, and we all want advisory committees to succeed, and this is a way to really start.
I thought the last one was a great success. I attended it, and people were just filled with information and willing to help, and I thought it was great. I'll be attending every other one in the future.
Wonderful. And then just really briefly about the Hackathon by the Sea, talk about tailoring to the unknown. Hackathons have been around for a while. This is the first one done in our county that specifically only targets high school students. It's December 1st and through December 2nd. It's a 21-hour event. It'll be over at VCOE. We are currently looking for mentors. We are trying to, again, tailor to the unknown. We don't know where our students are going to be at in terms of how advanced they are or how, maybe behind the curve they are. We know that we've been marketing for 2 weeks, and we have, of the 200 students that we're targeting, 75 have already registered to be at the event, so that's a great thing. And throughout the course of the event, we're trying to mix in these different, programs and languages that they can learn, everything from JavaScript to cybersecurity. So we're asking industry partners, if you'd like to volunteer to be a mentor, that's wonderful. If you'd like to volunteer to give out a 1-hour workshop on whatever topic you feel that you want to give, you can do that as well. Students will have an opportunity to sort of drop into these classes that are going to be held during the event as they sort of work on their project or prototype or whatever it is that they design. So
Rodrigo, what does a mentor do?
a mentor is an industry representative with maybe a specific skill set, and they will go around and they will work with the teams. So students will come and organize a team, and the mentors will work specifically with the students to help them maybe on a language they don't understand or a program that they're trying to figure out. It's a little different than a volunteer. A volunteer will maybe help with a little bit more logistical pieces, helping to set things up. A mentor is someone who specifically comes from the industry that can really help the students sort of either develop a skill or push them through the project that they're trying to work on, or teach them something new. So that's December 1st and December 2nd. You can visit hackathonbythesea.com and register to be a mentor, or tell someone that you know that's in high school to register for the event as well.
I'm going to do a workshop on cybersecurity. So just explaining to students what's actually going on in the industry and how businesses are affected, and, the skills that they need to learn to, go into that career field. All right, Mary Beth?
Yes.
Student outreach.
So last year, we were fortunate to get a $15,000 grant from the Alcoa Foundation, but the Alcoa entity from which we got the grant got spun off, and the resources are no longer available. But with those resources, we were able to give away 45 refurbished laptops. And the laptops were Dell Latitude laptops. They were loaded with Microsoft Office Suite. We had a carrying case, we had a flash drive, and a 4-year warranty. And it's very different theoretically saying that there are children who don't have computers and talking to these kids. Every student who got one of the laptops had to write an essay. And it is amazing that these kids are in an IT pathway and they have no computer at home. Or, they are writing their essays for school on their cell phones. And it's because, some of them have parents who are ill, some of them have parents who are working 2 jobs, some of them can't have access to the high school computers because they have childcare responsibilities. And these are bright kids. These are kids who want to be doctors and they want to be IT professionals. And the wheels are moving, and they're doing their best on their cell phones. So in any event, we have figured out that through the community college district, we may be able to get 100 laptops that we can refurbish, and Tiffany Morris may have access to another several hundred laptops that need to be refurbished. We spent $350 last year on that whole package, but since we'll already have the laptops, it will be substantially less. But I have no money to do anything with laptops. So if any of you knows somebody who might be interested in participating in the program, it would be great if we could get some of these laptops into the hands of students.
Wonderful.
Can you send that out to the email distribution?
Sure, I can do that.
So does anybody have any closing comments or suggestions you'd like to make? So we had brought up what is the point of Guild? It's to give and receive information, what's going on in the industry, the leadership from these various career fields, letting the education system know what their needs are. And then for us to go into the education system and help facilitate, providing better guidance, of new programs to develop and finding what they already have. Joining advisory committees, I think that is really, really important. At the Ventura Adult Continuing Education Center in Ventura, I'm on the advisory committee there for the Information Technology Department. And I feel it's very beneficial for them to have industry experts in there, guiding them, telling them what curriculum they should be, teaching, and what additional programs they should be facilitating. One idea that I'm going to have for the school is, I still don't know what to call it. A few of us had met at Bagel Shop in Camarillo Noah's Bagels, I think it was. You were there. This, what, 2 months ago or something like that, and came up with this idea. At the time, I thought the school had additional rooms in this new building that they had taken over, and what I want to do is dedicate one of those rooms as a transitionary stage for the students. So the students that are graduating from, let's say, computer repair, they're getting their Network Plus certification, cybersecurity or Security Plus certifications. They can transition from that course into this next stage where we can offer the community low-cost computer repair, building small business networks, very, very low cost, where the students can, you know, make some extra money and apply what they've learned, and it contributes to everybody. We can take a percentage of whatever those services generate and donate that back to the school for equipment or for other programs. Again, the students get to apply what they just learned in that course, make some extra money while they're looking for jobs. You know, I think that will help everybody, help the students. It will help prime them for the new job that they may get down the road. But having, you know, creative programs being put together like that at even the community colleges, I think is a great idea, and something that us as a group, we can help facilitate that. And this is where those kinds of ideas, you know, get created. So I want to thank everybody, and I really appreciate everybody's time and all your contributions, and, you know, we'll continue to move forward and help, you know, organize this, you know, better and better as we move along, and you know, refine where our focus should be. So I thank everybody.
Thank you.